Yeah, good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome for day 2 of our very own Bitcoin Finance Conference. It's a pleasure to welcome you on our stage today on this really sunny summer day in Berlin. And after Burkhard Balz has set the scene earlier today, on this stage today, we will predominantly focus on innovation in payments and on the world in crypto and blockchain. And so again, before we dive into our topics, I would like to encourage you to use our networking opportunities, connect with our partners, ask questions in the chat if you want to, and feel free to connect with the audience. And we already mentioned that yesterday, if you want to share something on Twitter or on social media, feel free to use our hashtag DigiFin21 to connect and to discuss online. And now we want to dive into the first keynote on this stage today. We heard that payments have become a really important strategic pillar in the finance ecosystem. It's no longer just about simple transactions, but it's really about offering convenience. It's about being close to the customer, and it's about driving innovation. And so, as one of our key themes of this year's Digital Finance Conference is digital sovereignty, there's one player that should not be missed, and that's the European Payment Initiative. And it's a pleasure for me to welcome Martina Weimert on stage. She is the CEO of the PEI and will give us a short presentation. And afterwards, you will have the chance to ask questions. We'll have a moderated Q&A by my colleague, Kevin. So Martina, thank you very much for being here, and the stage is yours.
Thank you, and thanks for having me on API. Indeed, we will talk about the European Payments Initiative. So I hope you can now all see my screen. I would like to introduce you briefly to API for those of you who have not become familiar with API so far. So we have here the first outline of the API. What is API? API will be a physical card, as what you know today, like a debit or credit card. On the other side, API will be also a wallet. This is very important because in the wallet, we will offer what we call the digital end-to-end SCT-IN solution, very complex name. What that really means is that we will offer instant payments in commerce. So the idea is that in that wallet, you can digitize your card, but you can also use directly instant payments tailor-made for commerce for whole Europe, which I think is a quite important innovation for API. We want to offer all kind of retail or commerce payment situations, so point of sale, E&M commerce, cash withdrawal, but also P2P and P2Pro. In addition, in API, there will be a couple of value-added services like combinations with digital identity, but also instant financing, which is very important, of course, for us. And all these services and the solution itself will be offered either through a standalone app, but also through the mobile banking app of the banks that are participating in API. This is very important. Everybody that participates in API will offer the same solution, which will bring up some more consistency than what we see today in Europe. And we will allow other parties, of course, to join over time. So this is an open environment, but the important part is that everybody will offer to the merchant and to the consumer the same services. Why am I insisting on that aspect? It is because we will offer choice to the consumer and to the merchant. So as a consumer tomorrow, I will be able to use API in a very traditional way as a card, or I will be using it as fully digital, so only going for the wallet solution. Both of the solutions will be at my choice, and the same is true for the merchant. If the merchant in the future wants to accept only instant payments, he can do so with API, or he can, of course, accept both, which is what we encourage. Ultimately, API will function everywhere in Europe, but also beyond the borders of Europe over time, once it is really established in Europe, and then we will go for international acceptance. So who is today in API? Today in API, we have 7 big markets represented with 22 shareholders. This is, of course, not full Europe, but it is quite interesting to see that with this coverage, we come up already to 7 markets representing 65% of all current card transactions in retail. And so a very good point to achieve critical mass in the future. I think it's also important to outline that API4 has now a non-Euro country on board, so Poland. So we will cater also for currency conversion. And it is very crucial for us that the biggest European acquirers, so Worldline and Nets, joined us in this effort. And so this drives more the ecosystem play of API and allows us to be more omnipresent from both sides in the markets and ensure that not only the issuing side, but also the acceptance and acquiring side will be well represented. Maybe as a last aspect to outline that we have also a group of smaller banks on board as consortium, which for us is an important participation model because it means that this is not a club of the big banks. This is really for all kind of financial institutions and acquirers in Europe, and they can all participate in it. We expect that other people and players will join the effort during the year. We are in very close talks with very other important markets of Europe. So that is important to get the European reach, which is of course crucial when you want to become a full-fledged pan-European player. But that is something we put on a hold for the time being and discussing just, but by the end of the year, you will see new players joining from October onwards when we will move on into what we call the target holdco company, because I should remind everybody right now, we are just or only so far in the interim company. So what are the objectives of API? Well, of course, there is the idea to get to a much bigger harmonization and efficiency. Right now in Europe, what we see is that there are so many fragmented solutions, which are, of course, not allowing Europe to get to a really one big player or a cross-border player. So this is the first obstacle that we try to overcome by aligning and coming to one target solution for all those players that are around the table so far. And that will give us the opportunity to create much more synergies, economies of scale, and to free up financial resources, which today we spend by implementing in each market the same things. Well, we would just implement it once for whole Europe, or at least for all those markets that are participating, and freeing up resources for innovation, which is what is really missing in Europe. And so that for us is super important and one of the big aims of API. And the first innovation that the consumer will see as well as functioning through one unified interface. Also, the aim is to bring instant payments, as I mentioned, to commerce. So really at the broad scale, because we all know that the major part of transactions in Europe are still on the commerce side, so in retail. And so we are really catering for all kind of situations. So if you want to pay with QR code or tomorrow with NFC and tokens, you can do that and use instant payments, but also your cards. So you will have a full range of payment solutions, sub-use cases, which are all those situations and services that we see currently developing among these European markets. So we try to really tailor-made it and come up with something which is leading edge. The full thing will be a good contribution to the European sovereignty, the topic of the day, and driving Europe to a much more independent setup. So allowing us to, for example, have our own standards, our own rule set, which is very important, our own brand, and really catering for the needs of the European consumer. Last but not least, I think we should underline that this caters for open governance. So it's a four-corner model, which will allow, as I said, and as you could see already, to involve, for example, the acceptance providers and acquirers from the very beginning, which is quite different from other schemes, but also working closely with merchants at Merchants Association, which is for us so important to get the feedback from the merchants also and understand what they are looking for. So these are, I would say, the important features. The consumer and the merchant will get immediate benefits. The merchants will have, well, these new payment solutions, but also value-added services. I think most importantly, they will get attractive pricing, and they will get the immediacy that goes with instant payments. So the choice there to offer this payment mean and cash in immediately, not having to wait for the payment to be settled on their account. So this is an innovation which is important for them, but also the European reach, and especially the one unique European integration instead of having many national solutions to be integrated as of today. The consumer, as I said, will get all out of the same interface instead of having today many different apps with different passwords or ways of functioning. So that will all be taken away here, and getting a smooth way how to authentify and enroll, because the banks will provide the data that is already available for them on the demand of their customers. We will also, of course, offer the security that goes with a bank offering, and again, offer these very specific value-added services, for example, instant financing, which means that you have natively and on a one-click basis a buy now, pay later solution available for yourself, and you can use it as your own disposal and whenever you want to, or you can simply not use it. So we think this will be a good starting point, and then we will enrich the solution by more value-added services. One word about the European character of all this. It is, of course, very much focusing on keeping data in Europe, being GDPR compliant, but also catering specifically for the needs of European consumers. So the use cases, specific ones we see developing in the various markets, and having our own independent setup. So our own technical platform, I mentioned already the standards and protocols, which will be specific. And we will bring those also then at EMVCo, so at an international level. I think it's also important to outline that we will not be profit maximizing, but going for a reasonable margin, which is quite different maybe from other solutions. So I think these aspects are quite important when we think about what is special about API. But I'm happy also to answer your questions and comments.
Martina, thank you so much for this introduction and giving us a view, or giving us the experience where you are at the moment. What are the plans? What are the components of EPI, the European Payments Initiative? What I think is quite striking, we heard it both as well in Burkhard Balz's keynote, but also Jörg Kukies mentioned it just minutes ago in his session, that he strongly believes in the success of EPI. So maybe to start with, I think what many of us would be interested in is, you pointed out, you have sort of, I would prescribe it as some sort of one-stop shop for payments. So you have card, you have mobile solutions, you have wallet solutions. I think you also mentioned later you have some built-in features like buy now, pay later. In your eyes, what are the main obstacles, so to say, to come up with this fully fledged flagship, so to say, like in terms of, getting this product market ready?
Yeah, I think it's fair to outline that this is a rather complex undertaking. I mean, it is a very broad scope, as you have seen. We have to catch up with the diversity of the various markets. So bringing really the usage together and providing something which will be relevant for the various markets. Even though we are more and more all digital, there are nevertheless some specific use cases in some markets. So that's the first challenge. I also think we should not forget, we are not starting out of nowhere. In many markets, there are domestic solutions, whether there are card schemes or digital solutions like Ideal, Blick, or Bism that exists. And nobody wants to destroy that value. So I think one of the challenges is how do you migrate really intelligently and in a smooth way the value of these solutions into API without destroying value, but also avoiding just to end up with a little patchwork solution, which would be of no interest at the end. So I would say this transformational path, that's a very big challenge.
I think this is very interesting, and maybe as a follow-up, you provided us with an overview, so to say, what countries are already part of EPI. You mentioned that a few more players will be joining toward the end of the year. Maybe especially from a German point of view, where we have quite a strong national scheme, and as you just said, it shouldn't be like a patchwork, but it should be like a fully fledged, coherent product. What has been your experience, to align national ideas and the European ideas?
Yeah, I think we spent a lot of time in the past doing consumer research, analyzing trends, and trying to understand how far are they relevant for Europe. For example, do we want to do QR code payments in Europe in a push and a pull mode in all kind of payment situations or not? Do we want to have instant payment and card payments as two different products or as one product? So basically equalizing both of them. So many of these considerations were made in the past and analyzed in terms of what is the willingness or the responsiveness of consumers, but also merchants to these propositions. So we went through all this analysis. I think the outcome of this is what I will call the API vision, which is the MVP or the first launch value proposition. Then, of course, I mean, the market is evolving, as you perfectly know, evolving so quickly that you will have constantly to enrich the solution, which is a good thing because now we will have the means to go for that innovation, but also to combine services from the market with API. So I think this vision is definitely there. And if you think about the German market, yes, of course, the domestic card scheme is very strong, as also in some other markets, we see the same situation. The idea is, of course, again, to manage this transformation. So what we will precisely do is some options of co-branding and triple badging in some cases in order to get the user accustomed to the new brand before we ask him really to fully switch. So by finally, getting rid of the national solutions, but having migrated the customers and getting used him to this whole new functioning and the way of choices that he can have with API.
I think it's interesting. I want to come to the consumers a bit later, but again, focusing on the German market, on the German payments market, you're well aware of. I mean, Germany as such is not like a front runner of digital payments. Let me put it gently that way. So overall, what is your perspective, your European perspective on Germany, and how far do you think that a project such as EPI can help us as an ecosystem to get at least 2 or 3 steps forward in terms of becoming more digital when it comes to payments? Maybe one anecdote, everyone who's in Berlin knows without cash it's hard to survive because there's still very little acceptance. And how far do you think you could be a key player in changing this in the future?
I think there is one very important aspect about API, which will be also our launch proposition, which is to start with pan-European P2P and P2Pro. We think this is a very nice and smooth way how to get the user accustomed to API, because it will basically, on a more easy way, allow you to experience how the solution works. And when we say to get it into the P2Pro usage, means also not just the pure P2P, but also using it, I don't know, for your gardener, for your babysitter, your yoga teacher, what have you. So I think there will be a smooth evolution, and we have seen that in other markets, that starting by P2P is definitely the right way how to convince softly and smoothly the user that this could be an interesting solution. Once the consumer is accustomed to the new brand, to the functioning, he will then be ready to use it also in full-fledged commerce solutions, right? So I think this is true even for the German market. And well, I think in Germany, it's not just the fact that maybe there is more cash than in other markets. Germany is not just that cash-driven market. Germany is also a market in which wallet solutions are already quite successful. We all know that PayPal or Apple Pay and all these solutions are definitely highly used in the German market by consumers. So I wouldn't say that the German market is so specific. I think what might be new is that this solution will be equally functioning in stationary commerce, so in shops, but also in E&M commerce. So your card will function in e-commerce, your STT solution will work in e-commerce. So that might be a new solution compared to what Girocards does so far, but which is also the aim of #DK. So all this is now converging in the right or in the same direction, which is to offer broader usage and choice to the consumer.
So speaking of innovation, and you just named a few other players such as PayPal. In your eyes, we saw this endeavor of building this fully fledged payment solution with EPI. What do you think is something you address that other payment solutions do at this stage? And maybe as a follow-up, what I would be interested in is if we look at the fintech system as it is of now, we see that sometimes or oftentimes, innovation comes from small fintechs that start rising. They are small, they're not that established, so they're quick to innovate. And you also mentioned earlier, innovation happens on the go, so it's not like EPI is here and it's finished, but it's an ongoing process. How do you ensure, as leader of EPI, so that you're fast enough and can compete maybe with fintechs that may be a bit faster when it comes to innovation?
Yeah, so that's why we start from the beginning with this rather broad scope in order to have not just one specific service, but really the broad range. And that's why we do this, very complex setup, but necessary as the market is already quite mature and there are huge expectations. You cannot just enter the market now with another nice to have me too solution. So the first benefit, as I said, is that you will really be able to get everything out of one interface and not having to download different apps. That's the first one. Second one is you will have this new payment mean as your disposal. There is no instant payments today in European commerce. So, and we really measure now what that means to build up. So I can only say it's a new way of functioning. It's not just taking the European rule book and putting it into commerce. That would not be enough because the European rule book is just interbanking and you don't have the consumer and the merchant solution so far. So that is something which we will provide. That will allow you, for example, as a consumer to do bigger purchases. For example, if you want to book a big trip or if you want to buy some luxury items, this is not possible today with your traditional card, not even with your credit card. So that is something new in this. Then you will have the buy now, pay later option at a click. Basically, I can just, when I'm standing in front of the cash register in the last second, decide, oh, this one, I want to buy it with a buy now, pay later without having to give my data to anybody else. It stays in my wallet. It's already with my bank, but the funds are immediately available for that transaction. So I think these are initial benefits. And of course, I think this nice experience to see wherever I travel, well, the P2P in Europe will work and the P2 Pro option too. So I think that is an interesting first initial value proposition, but I fully agree. I mean, we will have to enrich it every year.
So I think all of us will be very curious once EPI is launched for the consumer and see actually or have a taste what it feels like to use it. We don't have that much time left, but before we go to the outlook, maybe another question. I think one of the most discussed issues in the European payments discourse, aside from EPI, probably I think is the digital euro and CBDC. What do you have any idea in how far EPI and CBDC will go together, or is this something you are already considering for the future going forward, or how these two approaches may be interoperable in the future?
Yeah, I think it's a fantastic opportunity to bring these initiatives together. What I mean is, when CBDC or the digital euro will go live, there is a need for a distribution network. I don't think that the central bank wants to go out and promote their new solution to the market. So they need a distribution network, and they need somebody who also does, let's face it, the KYC. And there the banks are perfectly positioned to offer this kind of service. So I think API, the wallet of API, could tomorrow also host CBDC. So offer the digital euro on top of the card and instant payment solution. So giving even more choice to the consumer and allowing the central bank to have immediately a distribution network necessary available. So that is, I think, a fantastic opportunity actually for API. Of course, it requires to understand what would be exactly the respective roles, the functioning, the conditions, and so on. But you see the opportunity of bringing more value in that wallet proposition that we are working on. And the same is true with digital identity. Wouldn't it be fantastic if tomorrow with digital identity you could sign a contract and then immediately afterwards pay for what you have bought with API? That would be, I think, a very good combination and would definitely allow the European consumer to get much more digital services than what we see today.
Thanks for those insights, Martina. I really think it's interesting that, for me at least, it sounds like by design, EPI sets out to be open to innovation on the go. So I think all of us are pretty excited what the product will look like. So maybe you indicated some timelines. You indicated there may be a global rollout even in the future. So maybe for our users and consumers in the audience, when will we be able to have like a co-badged EPI card in our physical wallets, or have a EPI digital wallet on our smartphones?
Yeah, so we have foreseen the first market launch, but probably the P2P, P2 Pro for next year. We are right now investigating with each of the market by when they can be definitely ready, in order to come also together on a consistent timeline, maybe not everybody on the same dates, but then as soon as possible. And yes, through the assessments we are doing right now, well, we have good hope that from next year onwards, this will be possibly certainly more to the second half of the year, but at latest in 2023. But the first offerings, you will have it from next year onwards.
Okay, I guess then we have to stay curious. We definitely have a look of what's gonna happen, and I hope, Martina, first of all, thank you for taking your time today, and I hope to catch up on this matter next year and to have you back maybe at DigiFin 2022, hopefully physically then again, and until then, thanks so much, yeah, and hope to see you soon.
Thank you. Thanks.